I never expected my 5-year marriage to end with a 2:14 a.m. text message from Paris saying, "Just eloped with my boss. You were holding me back." But when I calmly replied, "Thanks for the update," and opened the folder labeled Emergency Protocol, Infidelity, that I'd prepared 6 months earlier, Victoria had no idea she'd just triggered the complete dismantling of a life she thought was hers, but had always been entirely under my control. Before we dive into this incredible story of ultimate betrayal and swift justice, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more revenge stories that will blow your mind, and comment below where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. The notification sound from my iPhone cut through the silence of my home office. At exactly 2:14 a.m. Pacific time, I'd been working late on quarterly reports for my investment portfolio. A glass of Macallan 25 sitting untouched beside my laptop as I reviewed the performance metrics of my various holdings. Victoria had been in Paris for what she claimed was a creative retreat with her marketing firm, and I'd grown accustomed to the time zone difference making our communication sporadic. But this message was different. "Just eloped with my boss. You were holding me back. Don't try to contact me." I stared at the screen for exactly 30 seconds, feeling a strange calmness wash over me instead of the rage or devastation she probably expected. The message was accompanied by a photo. Victoria in a white silk dress that cost $3,000, purchased with our joint credit card 2 weeks ago for what she claimed was a client dinner, standing beside Charles Whitmore, CEO of Meridian Marketing Solutions, both of them grinning in front of what looked like a Paris courthouse. Charles Whitmore, the same man whose startup I'd been anonymously funding through my venture capital firm for the past 18 months. The same man whose company I owned 27% of without his knowledge. The same man whose wife Eleanor I'd been quietly providing evidence to about her husband's affair for the past 9 months. I took a slow sip of the Macallan, savoring the smoky finish, then typed my reply. "Thanks for the update." Victoria's response came immediately, as if she'd been waiting by her phone for my reaction. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I deleted the message without responding and walked across my home office to the mahogany filing cabinet that contained documents Victoria had never seen, never asked about, and never suspected existed. From the bottom drawer, I retrieved a manila folder with a label I'd hoped I'd never need to use. Emergency Protocol, Infidelity. Inside were copies of our prenuptial agreement with specific clauses highlighted in yellow, account numbers for every financial instrument in Victoria's name, contact information for my attorney with instructions for immediate divorce proceedings, and most importantly, a detailed inventory of every asset Victoria believed she owned, but which actually belonged to various trusts and holding companies under my control. Victoria had always assumed I was simply a trust fund baby living off inherited wealth. She had no idea that I managed a $340 million investment portfolio, owned pieces of 17 different companies, and had spent the past 5 years carefully structuring our finances to protect everything I'd built, while giving her access to luxury she'd never earned. What she also didn't know was that I'd been documenting her affair with Charles for 9 months, ever since my private investigator first photographed them entering the Ritz-Carlton downtown for what was definitely not a business meeting. I opened my laptop and began executing the plan I'd hoped I'd never need. The first call went to my attorney, Margaret Chen, whose direct line I'd been given specifically for emergencies like this. "Margaret, it's James. Victoria just sent me confirmation that she's eloped with her boss in Paris. I need to execute the emergency divorce protocol we discussed." Margaret's voice was immediately alert despite the early hour. "James, I'm sorry this happened, but I have to say, your preparation is about to pay off. Do you have written confirmation of the elopement?" Text message with photo evidence, sent from her phone. "I'll forward it to you immediately." "Perfect. That satisfies the adultery clause in your prenuptial agreement. I'll have divorce papers filed by 9 a.m., and given the forfeiture provisions, this should be straightforward. Are you ready to execute the financial protocols?" I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my home office, looking out at the Pacific Ocean beyond the manicured grounds of our $12 million Malibu estate. The property sat on 4 acres of prime coastal real estate, with a main house, guest cottage, infinity pool, and private beach access. Victoria had spent 5 years acting like she owned it, hosting dinner parties for her friends, posting Instagram photos from the infinity pool, referring to it as our dream home in conversations with her family. She had no idea the property was owned by the Hartwell Family Trust, of which she had never been a beneficiary. Margaret, freeze everything. Joint accounts, credit cards, property access, vehicle registrations, all of it. I want her completely financially severed by the time she tries to return from Paris. What about the holding company assets? I smiled, thinking about Victoria's complete ignorance of how our finances actually worked. She doesn't even know they exist. But I want Charles Whitmore informed that his primary investor, that would be me, is calling an emergency board meeting to discuss his leadership. James, you own 27% of his company? Anonymous investment through Hartwell Ventures. Charles has no idea who his largest outside investor actually is, but he's about to find out, right around the time his wife receives the divorce papers I've been helping her prepare. The second call went to my estate manager, Robert, who maintains security and property access for all of my real estate holdings. Robert, I need all access codes changed for the Malibu property immediately. Gate codes, garage doors, house alarm, everything. Victoria is no longer authorized for property access as of right now. Sir, is everything all right? Victoria has eloped with another man in Paris. She forfeited her access privileges under the terms of her residency agreement. Robert's voice remained professionally neutral. I'll handle the changes within the hour, Mr. Hartwell. Should I also update the authorized vehicle list? Remove her access to all vehicles. The Porsche, the Range Rover, even the Tesla, all of them are registered to holding companies she was never actually an owner of. The third call was to my private banker at Goldman Sachs who managed our joint investment accounts. David, it's James Hartwell. I need immediate freezes on all accounts with Victoria Hartwell as an authorized user. I'll be emailing you legal documentation within the hour, showing cause for emergency asset protection. James, are we talking about the joint portfolios? Everything. The $1.2 million investment portfolio, the money market accounts, the credit lines secured by trust assets. She just informed me via text message that she's married another man, which triggers the adultery forfeiture clauses in our financial agreements. I understand completely. Consider all joint access frozen immediately. She'll receive notification of the account restrictions by email within 30 minutes. By 3:45 a.m., I had successfully severed Victoria's access to every financial resource she'd been using to fund her affair and her new elopement adventure. Her black American Express card, which she'd used to book first-class flights to Paris for both herself and Charles, was now declined. Her access to our joint checking account, which contained $47,000, was terminated. Her authorization to use any of the 3 luxury vehicles in our garage was revoked. Most importantly, her legal claim to any assets she'd assumed were ours had evaporated the moment she said, "I do," to another man in a Paris courthouse. I poured myself another glass of Macallan and sat back in my leather chair, watching the sunrise begin to paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and pink. Victoria was probably just waking up in Paris, anticipating a romantic breakfast with her new husband, completely unaware that her life as she knew it had just disappeared. Victoria had always seen me as the boring, predictable husband who'd inherited family money and spent his days managing investments she didn't understand or care about. During our 5-year marriage, she'd shown zero interest in the details of our finances, content to use the credit cards I provided and live in the luxury I maintained without questioning how any of it actually worked. What she never suspected was that I'd spent those 5 years carefully documenting every aspect of our relationship, including the gradual decline in her commitment and the increasing signs that she was planning an exit strategy. The affair with Charles had started approximately 9 months ago, based on the surveillance reports from my private investigator, Marcus Rivera. What began as suspicious late nights at client dinners had evolved into weekend trips for industry conferences that Charles also happened to attend, and finally to the current situation where they decided to make their relationship permanent in the most dramatic way possible. But Victoria had made a critical error in choosing Charles as her affair partner. Charles Whitmore's startup, Meridian Marketing Solutions, had approached my venture capital firm 18 months ago looking for Series A funding. His business plan was solid, his market analysis was compelling, and his initial client roster showed genuine potential. What he lacked was the capital to scale his operations and compete with established marketing firms. I'd provided that capital, $4.2 million over 2 investment rounds, through Hartwell Ventures, one of my holding companies that maintained strict confidentiality about investor identities. Charles knew he had a major investor who owned 27% of his company, but he had no idea that investor was married to his head of creative strategy. Even more interesting was Charles's wife, Eleanor, who'd contacted me 6 months ago through a mutual friend who suspected both of our spouses were having an affair. Eleanor was a family law attorney with access to forensic accounting services and private investigators. Over the past 9 months, we've been sharing information about Charles and Victoria's activities, building comprehensive documentation of their affair while maintaining complete deniability about our cooperation. The evidence was overwhelming. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges on company credit cards, travel records showing they'd attended the same conferences in different cities. And most damning, email communications between them discussing their plans to start fresh once they'd both dealt with their current situations. Eleanor had filed for divorce from Charles 2 weeks ago, but had kept the proceedings quiet while she gathered additional evidence. Charles had no idea his marriage was already over. His company was about to lose its primary investor, and his new wife had just forfeited millions of dollars in assets by marrying him. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "James, I just saw the Paris photos on Victoria's Instagram. Charles left yesterday claiming he had an emergency client meeting. I assume you're ready to proceed with the next phase?" I replied immediately. "Everything is in motion." Charles will receive notification of the emergency board meeting this morning, along with disclosure of investor identity. I assume your divorce papers are ready to be served. Already filed. He'll be served at the hotel in Paris this afternoon. I hope Victoria enjoys her honeymoon. It's going to be the most expensive 24 hours of her life. While I was systematically dismantling Victoria's financial life from my home office in Malibu, she was discovering the first consequences of her impulsive decision. At 11:30 a.m. Paris time, Victoria and Charles attempted to check out of their honeymoon suite at the Plaza Athénée, one of Paris's most expensive hotels. The bill for their 3-night stay came to €8,400, which Victoria confidently attempted to pay with her black American Express card. "I'm sorry, madame," the desk clerk said in accented English, "but this card has been declined. Do you have an alternative form of payment?" Victoria's face flushed with embarrassment as other guests in the ornate lobby turned to watch the scene unfold. "That's impossible. Try it again." The clerk complied, but the result was the same. "Perhaps you could call your bank?" Charles stepped forward with his own corporate credit card, trying to salvage the situation. "Use this one. There must be some mistake with her account." But Charles's card was also declined, for reasons he couldn't understand. What he didn't know was that Eleanor had frozen all joint accounts and corporate credit lines as part of her divorce filing, leaving Charles with only his personal checking account, which contained approximately $3,200. "Sir, your card is also being declined. The amount exceeds your available credit limit." Victoria's voice rose with panic and anger. "This is ridiculous. Call the bank immediately. There's obviously been some kind of error." But when Victoria called the customer service number for American Express, the news was devastating. "Mrs. Hartwell, your account has been closed due to adultery forfeiture provisions in your cardholder agreement. This action was initiated by the primary account holder, James Hartwell, with documentation provided by his legal counsel." Victoria stared at her phone in disbelief. "What do you mean, adultery forfeiture provisions?" "According to the documentation we received, your marriage to Mr. Hartwell has been dissolved due to your elopement with another party, and all financial privileges associated with his accounts have been immediately terminated." Charles watched his new bride's face go pale as the reality of their situation began to sink in. "Victoria, what's happening?" "James closed all the accounts. He knows about us, and he's cutting off all my access to money. They managed to negotiate a payment plan with the hotel that would allow them to pay half the bill immediately and settle the remainder within 30 days. But that left them with less than $1,500 in available cash and no way to cover their return flights to Los Angeles. The situation worsened when they arrived at their Airbnb rental for the remainder of their stay. Victoria had booked a luxury apartment in the 7th arrondissement using the same American Express card that was now closed. The property management company had automatically attempted to charge the card for the remaining nights, and when the payment failed, they had changed the door codes and left a notice about immediate eviction for non-payment. Victoria stood on the cobblestone street outside the apartment building, still wearing her $3,000 wedding dress, screaming into her phone at an Airbnb customer service representative who was explaining that she had no recourse since her payment method was invalid. "This is insane," she yelled, drawing stares from passing tourists. "My husband is trying to ruin our honeymoon out of spite." Charles, meanwhile, was checking his email and discovering news that would make their financial situation even more catastrophic. The message was from the board of directors of Meridian Marketing Solutions. "Charles, we've received notification from our primary investor requesting an emergency board meeting regarding your leadership and personal conduct. Please be available for a video conference tomorrow at 9 a.m. PST to discuss allegations of misuse of company resources and violation of your employment contract's morality clause." Charles read the message 3 times before the implications began to register. His company's primary investor, the anonymous entity that owned 27% of Meridian and had provided the capital that made his success possible, somehow knew about his personal life and was calling his leadership into question. "Victoria," he said, his voice tight with growing panic, "I think we have bigger problems than hotel bills." At 6:02 a.m. Pacific Time, exactly 16 hours after Victoria's elopement announcement, the intercom system at the main gate of my Malibu estate crackled to life with the sound of frantic pounding on wrought iron. I was sitting on the master bedroom balcony, drinking coffee and reading the Wall Street Journal's morning market reports when the noise began. Through the morning marine layer, I could see 2 figures at the security gate. Victoria, in what appeared to be a designer coat thrown over a wrinkled wedding dress, and Charles in a rumpled suit that suggested they'd traveled directly from LAX, without stopping to change clothes. "James!" Victoria's voice came through the intercom speaker, shrill with desperation and fury. "Open this gate right now. We need to talk." I set down my coffee cup and walked to the intercom panel, pressing the talk button with deliberate calm. "This property is owned by the Hartwell Family Trust, of which you are not a beneficiary. You are currently trespassing on private property." "Trespassing?" Victoria's voice cracked with disbelief. "I live here. This is my house, too. Your residency agreement was terminated at 2:14 a.m. yesterday when you informed me of your marriage to another man. Under the terms of your agreement, adultery results in immediate forfeiture of all property access rights." Through the security cameras, I watched Victoria turn to Charles with an expression of growing panic. She'd clearly expected to return home, perhaps have a difficult conversation about divorce terms, and then proceed with some kind of reasonable settlement that would allow her to maintain her lifestyle while pursuing her new relationship. Instead, she was discovering that she had no legal claim to anything she'd considered hers for the past 5 years. "James, please," Victoria's voice had shifted from anger to pleading. "I know you're hurt, but we can work this out like adults. I just need to get some of my things, and we can discuss how to handle the divorce reasonably." I took another sip of coffee, watching Charles pace nervously behind Victoria while checking his phone repeatedly. He was probably receiving updates about his own rapidly deteriorating situation. "Victoria, all personal items that belong to you have been packed and will be shipped to your parents' address in Phoenix. You'll receive tracking information once the shipment is processed." "My parents? James, what are you talking about? I'm not going to Phoenix." "According to your driver's license, your parents' address is your official residence for legal purposes. Since you no longer have authorized access to any California properties, that's where your belongings will be forwarded." Charles stepped closer to the intercom, his voice carrying clearly through the speaker. "Look, James, I understand you're upset, but there's no need to be vindictive. Victoria and I fell in love, and we handled it badly. but we can resolve this situation professionally." I almost laughed at his use of the word professionally. "Charles, you might want to check your email. Your board of directors is requesting an emergency meeting regarding your use of company resources to conduct an extramarital affair. Oh, and by the way, congratulations on marrying a woman who just forfeited $4.8 million in assets. I hope the honeymoon was worth it." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Charles frantically scrolling through his phone messages. "James," Victoria's voice was now desperate, "please just talk to me face to face. 5 years of marriage has to count for something. I made a mistake, but..." I pressed the intercom button one final time. "Victoria, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to have an affair for 9 months. You chose to use my money to fund your romance with Charles, and you chose to elope with him in Paris using credit cards linked to my accounts. Every decision you made was deliberate and calculated." I paused, watching her face crumble as she realized the full scope of what she'd lost. "The mistake was mine. I should have ended this marriage months ago when I first discovered your affair. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to make the right choice on your own. Instead, you chose Charles and forfeited everything else." Through the security cameras, I watched Victoria sink to her knees on the stone pathway, the reality of her situation finally hitting her with full force. Charles stood behind her, still staring at his phone as messages continued to arrive documenting the collapse of his professional life. "Tell Charles to check his severance agreement," I added. The morality clause he signed includes a non-compete provision that prohibits him from working in digital marketing for any company that competes with Meridian clients. Since I own 27% of Meridian, and since Eleanor owns another 15% through her divorce settlement, we'll be voting to enforce that clause immediately. I turned off the intercom and walked back to my coffee and newspaper, leaving Victoria and Charles to absorb the magnitude of what their impulsive decision had cost them. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my attorney's downtown office with Margaret Chen, signing the final documents that would legally dissolve my marriage and strip Victoria of any claim to assets she'd never actually owned. "James, I have to say, this is the most thorough asset protection strategy I've seen in 15 years of family law," Margaret said, reviewing the paperwork spread across her conference table. "Every major asset was properly shielded through trusts and holding companies. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad, and your documentation of the affair provides clear grounds for the forfeiture clauses." She slid a document across the table. "This is the final property reassignment form. Once you sign this, Victoria will be officially removed from all trust beneficiary lists, property access authorizations, and financial accounts." I reviewed the document carefully. It listed every asset Victoria had believed she had rights to: the $12 million Malibu estate, the $2.3 million investment portfolio, the luxury vehicles worth $340,000 combined, even her jewelry collection, which had been purchased with funds from accounts she'd never actually owned. Under California community property law, she should have been entitled to half of everything acquired during our marriage. But the prenuptial agreement she'd signed, and mocked at the time, contained specific forfeiture provisions that voided her claims in the event of adultery. "Margaret, what happens to Charles's company?" "That's the beautiful part. As the primary investor, you have the right to call for his removal as CEO due to the morality clause violation. Eleanor, as his soon-to-be ex-wife, will receive his 23% ownership stake in the divorce settlement, giving your combined interests voting control. And his non-compete clause? Enforceable for 3 years in California. He can't work for any company that competes with Meridian's client base, which includes most major marketing firms in Los Angeles. He'll have to either relocate to another state or find work in a completely different industry." I signed the property reassignment form with a Mont Blanc pen that had been a wedding gift from Victoria's parents. Parents who still had no idea their daughter had eloped with her boss and forfeited millions of dollars in the process. As I finished signing the documents, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Victoria's number. Should I answer it? Margaret shook her head. At this point, any communication should go through legal counsel. You've done everything correctly and legally. Don't give her an opportunity to claim harassment or intimidation. I declined the call, and deleted the voicemail without listening to it. That afternoon, I returned to the Malibu estate that was now entirely mine, walking through rooms that Victoria had decorated with furniture purchased using my money, looking at art she'd selected from galleries she'd visited, using credit cards I'd provided. The house felt different now. Not empty, but cleaner somehow, as if a source of tension I'd grown accustomed to had finally been removed. My assistant, Sarah, had prepared a summary of the day's developments. Charles had been terminated from Meridian Marketing Solutions effective immediately, with the board citing violation of his employment contract's morality clause. Eleanor's divorce was proceeding rapidly, with Charles agreeing to her terms rather than face a lengthy battle he couldn't afford. Victoria had been officially removed from all trust documents, property authorizations, and financial accounts. Sarah, what's the status on Victoria's personal belongings? Everything has been packed and shipped to her parents' address in Phoenix. Clothing, jewelry, personal items, all of it. The shipment will arrive tomorrow, with signature confirmation required. And the vehicles? All 3 cars have been re-registered solely in your name. The insurance policies have been updated, and the spare keys have been collected. I walked to my home office and opened the manila folder that had started this entire process. Inside was a handwritten note I'd prepared 6 months ago, when I first suspected Victoria's affair, but still hoped I was wrong. If you're reading this, it means Victoria chose betrayal over honesty, adultery over marriage, and temporary pleasure over long-term partnership. You gave her every opportunity to make different choices. Her decision to destroy our marriage was hers alone. I folded the note and placed it in the fireplace, watching it burn to ash. My phone buzzed with another text from Victoria. James, please. I know I hurt you, but destroying my entire life isn't going to fix anything. Can we please just talk like reasonable people? I stared at the message for several seconds, thinking about 5 years of marriage, 9 months of documented betrayal, and one impulsive decision in Paris that had revealed Victoria's true character. Then I deleted the message without responding. Another text arrived immediately. You're being vindictive and cruel. This isn't like you. What happened to the man I married? This time I typed a response. The man you married trusted you completely and protected you financially without your knowledge. The man you're texting now learned that trust without verification is just naivety with expensive consequences. I hit send, then blocked her number. 2 days later, I received a call from Victoria's father, Robert Morrison, a man I genuinely respected during our 5-year marriage. James, I need to understand what's happening. Victoria showed up at our house yesterday with 2 suitcases and a story about eloping in Paris. She's saying you've frozen all her accounts and locked her out of the house. Is this true? Robert's voice was careful and measured. He was a retired aerospace engineer who approached problems methodically, and I could hear him trying to gather facts before making judgments. Robert, Victoria didn't tell you the full story. She's been having an affair with her boss for 9 months. She eloped with him in Paris using credit cards linked to my accounts, then texted me at 2 a.m. to inform me she'd married another man and that I was holding her back. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. James, are you telling me that Victoria has been cheating on you for 9 months and she married this other man while still married to you? That's exactly what I'm telling you. I have documentation going back 9 months. Hotel receipts, travel records, surveillance photos, email communications between them planning their affair. And the financial situation? I took a breath, preparing to explain something that Victoria had never understood herself. Robert, Victoria assumed that our assets were joint property under California law. What she never realized was that every major asset, the house, the cars, the investment accounts, were owned by family trusts and holding companies that she was never a beneficiary of. The prenuptial agreement she signed contained forfeiture clauses that voided her access to those assets in the event of adultery. So she actually has no legal claim to any of the property she's been living with for 5 years? None. The Malibu house is owned by the Hartwell Family Trust. The vehicles are registered to holding companies. The investment accounts were always in my name, with her as an authorized user, not a co-owner. She had access to luxury and financial resources as my wife, but she never actually owned any of it. Robert's engineering background made him appreciate the technical aspects of what I'd done. James, that's actually brilliant asset protection. But it means Victoria is essentially starting over with nothing. Robert, I want you to know that Victoria is welcome to stay with you as long as necessary. I'm not trying to make her homeless or destitute, but I'm also not going to continue funding her life after she chose to marry another man. What about this boss she married? Can't he support her? I almost smiled at the question. Charles was fired from his company for violating his employment contract. He's also going through his own divorce, which is going to cost him most of his assets. The non-compete clause in his contract prevents him from working in marketing for the next 3 years. He went from CEO to unemployed in about 48 hours. Jesus Christ, Robert muttered. Victoria really picked a winner. Robert, I'm sorry this happened. I genuinely liked being part of your family, and I'm sorry Victoria's choices have put you in this position. James, can I ask you something? Of course. Did you love her? I mean, really love her. Not just the lifestyle and the convenience.
I thought about the question seriously. I loved who I thought she was.
I loved the woman who seemed grateful for the opportunities I could provide, who appeared to be building a life with me rather than just using me as a stepping stone to something else. But I don't think that woman ever actually existed. Fair enough. And James? Yes? For what it's worth, I think you handled this exactly right. Victoria made her bed, and now she gets to sleep in it. 3 weeks later, as I was reviewing quarterly investment reports in my home office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. James, this is Victoria. I'm using my mom's phone because you blocked mine. I need you to know that Charles left me. He went back to his wife and said our marriage was a mistake. I have nothing now. No money, no car, no place to live except my parents' spare room. Please, can we talk about working something out? I know I hurt you, but I'm begging you to have some compassion. I stared at the message for several minutes, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. There was no satisfaction in Victoria's suffering. I'd never wanted to hurt her, only to protect myself from the consequences of her betrayal. But there was also no inclination to rescue her from the situation she'd created. I typed a response. Victoria, I'm sorry your marriage to Charles didn't work out, but that's not my responsibility to fix. You made a choice to prioritize a 9-month affair over a 5-year marriage. The consequences of that choice belong to you, not to me. I paused, then continued typing. I never wanted to destroy your life. I wanted to protect mine from being destroyed by your choices. The difference is important. I sent the message, then deleted the conversation thread. A few minutes later, another text arrived from the same number. So that's it? 5 years of marriage means nothing to you? This time I responded immediately. 5 years of marriage meant everything to me. That's why I'm not willing to pretend the last 9 months of betrayal didn't happen. You chose Charles over our marriage. The fact that Charles didn't choose you back doesn't make me responsible for your situation. You're heartless. I looked at that message for a long time before responding, one final time. Victoria, I protected you financially for 5 years without you even knowing it. I documented your affair for 9 months while hoping you'd end it and choose our marriage instead. I gave you every opportunity to make different choices. The only thing heartless here is expecting me to continue protecting you from the consequences of betraying me. I blocked the new number and walked out to the infinity pool overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. And for the first time in months, I felt genuinely peaceful. Victoria had wanted excitement, passion, and a new life with Charles. She'd gotten a 24-hour marriage in Paris and a return ticket to her childhood bedroom in Phoenix. Charles had wanted to have his cake and eat it too, keep his successful company while pursuing an affair with his employee. He'd gotten unemployment, divorce, and a 3-year prohibition from working in his chosen field. I had wanted a wife who chose our marriage over other temptations. When that proved impossible, I'd settled for protecting everything I'd built from those who would destroy it for temporary pleasures. Sometimes, The best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes, it's simply refusing to subsidize other people's betrayal of your trust. The manila folder labeled Emergency Protocol Infidelity was empty now, its contents having served their purpose. But the lesson remained. Preparation, documentation, and self-protection were better than trust without verification. Victoria had counted on my kindness and assumed my forgiveness. She'd been half right. I was kind enough not to actively destroy her, but not foolish enough to continue funding her betrayal. Some mistakes cost everything. Some choices can't be undone. And sometimes, the person you underestimate is the only one who was prepared for the worst-case scenario. She'd texted me that I was holding her back. As it turned out, I'd been holding her up all along. And when I stopped, gravity did the rest.